Greetings, campers! Welcome back to The World According to Yoni. Yes, it's me, Yoni Martin. I am here. I am back. I feel like I've been spending as much time in bed with whatever illnesses or injuries have happened to me lately as I have on here. But I'm here, and I've got a wonderful show for you. My guest today is the author of a book called Oh My God, It's Harvey Korman's Son. And his son would be my friend, Chris Korman. Chris is a wonderful person. He was born with some severe learning disabilities. And the book, rather than being a biography of his father, is more a love letter to his father. It is a son talking about his father in a way I wish more sons could talk about their fathers, because Harvey sacrificed an enormous amount to make sure Chris was okay, that he got the education he did end up getting, and lived a normal life, which Chris is doing. So I'm not going to belabor the point. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Chris Korman. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Yoni. How are you?
I am actually good. That's better than you guys with a blackout last night.
That was not fun.
All right, let's get to it. Let's get to the important stuff. You have a book. Yes. OMG, it's Harvey Korman's son. And here you are, Harvey Korman's son. Go figure.
I was going to call it The Son of a Man of a Thousand Sketches. And I think a lot of people, I don't know, Yanni, would have understood sketches. They would have thought sketches. Unless I infer a man of a thousand comedy sketches. So
you just went with,
oh my God, it's Harvey Korman's son. That's usually what people say when they meet me. It's like, oh my God, it's Harvey Korman's son. So I thought the title seemed apropos. I was going to call it, you would write a book too if your father was a green Martian.
You should explain that, because there are some people who don't know your father's history with the Great Gazoo.
Right, so you had to think of the marketing aspect of it. I was going to say, or I could have done, if you'd write a book too if your father was a cross-dressing Jewish comedian from Chicago who was heavily Lamar. Can't do that either.
No, probably not.
So, but I am going to update the book actually in January next year. My publisher said I can update it with a new picture on the cover, and I can add a picture of my dad's mother that's never been seen.
Ah.
So, and add some stories that have not been told. I can only cram so much RAM into my brain when it came to the book, Yanni. It was like, I kept to 165 pages, which I thought was reasonable. But if I add another 20, it's fine, but it's got to fit in with the idea of, this wasn't a tell-all book. This was tell stories that connect in an idea, which is, yes, my father was a public figure, but that he was a father of a child with a learning disability first, and a celebrity second. And my dad and my mother never, ever, ever made me feel ashamed that I had a learning disability or I had a challenge.
Let's for the audience who has not read your book, some of them at least, let's explain what the learning disability was, what you were born with, and.
Okay, I was born, like John F. Kennedy, I was born with a thing called hyaline membrane disease, Hyliene. It's a lack of oxygen to the brain and the central nervous system. So from birth, my hand-eye coordination and gross motor skills were pretty much, I wouldn't say destroyed, but incredibly, very, very affected in a bad way. I mean, I didn't learn how to ride a bike till I was 14. My hand-eye coordination, gross motor skills were not comparable to other children. I've endured surgery on my eyes, cross eyes, at the Jules Stein Medical Center at UCLA. And people, I don't know if a lot of people know who Jules Stein is.
Well, anybody who doesn't know Jules Stein as the great composer of Funny Girl and Well, for me, Sugar with Robert Morris and Tony Roberts, great composer. So,
and then I had a reconstructive jaw surgery to correct an overbite at the age of 14. So I've had my battles. And I like to think I came out the other end pretty good. But
I'd say you did.
I thank you. I think being the son of Harvey Korman, I like to think that I'm not a vain person, but there was a level of presentational issues that if I was going to be out in the public eye, at least this was in my head, I could not look and sound like Roger Rabbit and look like Bugs Bunny. I had to have a presentable appearance. If I was going to be out there and doing public speaking, I had to have a level of coherence, a level of. So the surgery on the jaw wasn't for vanity; it was to correct an overbite. If I worried about vanity, I'd be wearing a toupee right now. But I'm not that vain yet. But so yeah, I've had my struggles early in the beginning. But so people understand this, a learning disability, the clinical diagnosis is just basically it's a delay in the learning process and the ability to retain information long term. So things would go in my head, and then 20 seconds later, I go, oh, I have to reread that again, because unlike dyslexia, which is actually a reading issue, because there are 156 types of dyslexia, there's only one kind of learning disability. So somewhere in the 80s, and I'm not going to go on a tangent, somewhere in the 80s, everybody thought the best way to secure funding is let's group dyslexia and LD together. That's like grouping the blind with the deaf. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And I really had to explain to my mother, don't tell people I had dyslexia, because if you tell people I had dyslexia, that's a different disability. And my mom would say, no, I just kind of group them together. It's like, yeah, you can't do that, because people are going to start giving you the wrong resources.
Yeah.
I can read. That's not the problem. But people with dyslexia tend to flip words like B and D. And there's like I said, there's 156 types of dyslexia. So I spent a good portion of my life having to, lack of a better word, reteach people or explain to people that if you fixate on the word disabled, I'm not unable to learn. I learn. I just learn at a different pace and at a different time. Your wife would understand that too. The people who have challenges understand we have to learn at our own pace and our own time, because that's the only way you can learn. I have a specific learning style. But this country, Yoni, for some reason, likes to fixate on the word dis as an unable. And that downgrades us and it labels us something that we're not. We're not stupid. We just learn slower.
No, but this country, let's face it, it likes it easy.
Yes.
Give it to us easy, so a quick bite, so we don't have to think too hard.
Yes, but God forbid you should label that.
No, of course.
I mean, any kind of label that is it's an impediment, it's a roadblock to letting people evolve into what they need to evolve and to grow into by putting labels on them. I say labels are good for sock drawers and utensils in the kitchen. But labels are not good for the human race.
No, I agree.
The human progress of people who have challenges. So from the very beginning, my father, the book really, my wife is the one who really was the visionary of this book. She said, it's got to be a love letter to your dad's fan, but it has to have I didn't know that quality to it. That way, because Carol wrote her book, Tim's written his book, Vicky's written her book. They all have their interpretation of my father. It's not my interpretation of my father, because who he was at the Burnett Show wasn't who he was at home. Because to me, he was a father first, advocate first, before he was a celebrity. Whatever insecurities my parents might have had about raising a child with a learning disability in the public eye was secondary to getting me the help I needed to be successful in this world. So whatever pride and ego they might have had or insecurities they might have had, you would never know it. Because when we had family over or friends over, Steve Lawrence, me, Gourmet, Carol, or anybody, it was come downstairs. You can commiserate, talk for a little bit. but when it's time to go upstairs, but they never made me feel like, oh, the speech impediment and learning disability. It's like you're the black sheep of the family. I said, well, you're worried about how I look and sound. My father spent the majority of my time dressed up like a chicken and worry about my image. I said, I think we need to prioritize our priorities here. Because I used to joke with my dad. He used to say, when you're in college, I went to a college in Boston, Yoni. It was called Lesley College. It was in Cambridge, Mass, Boston.
I'm familiar with Wesley.
Okay, so on it was our program was adjoined with the Lesley College campus, so we used their campus for our classes. So the first day of class, I'm going, and there's 10,000 girls, and my dad said, "How long have you been there?" I said, "An hour, maybe two." I said, "You haven't gotten the date yet?" He said, "Give me a break." I said, "You would really would be a big help, Dad, for my social development if you could stop wearing women's clothing to make a living."
Yeah.
Like, I'll think about it, but just remind you, doing the Burnett Show and doing Love Boat put you through college. I said, that might be true, but I would have settled for community college with the priesthood at this point. So he said, haha, very funny, haha. But yeah, I think, but from early on, from the age of 4, I was already in the public eye. I went to a school called the Marion Frost Center in Los Angeles. That was taken over by Cedars of Lebanon and La Cienega in Los Angeles. And it was a very progressive program where Marion Frost was a school that was designed to appeal to the whole child, not just focus on the negative aspect of the child, but appeal to the educational therapy of it, the emotional, the psychological, the creative. Because in this country, we don't seem to measure creative or artistic value.
Oh God, no.
Yeah, what I don't get is, but if you go to London, they're measuring artistic aspirations feed for 14 and 15 with their students. Why are we not doing that in this country? Because the government can't deposit a child's smile into their bank account. That's why.
No, we are programmed to become cogs to fit into the system. Right. Creative thought, especially independent creative thought, is, are you kidding? That's who are you? Go away. We don't want you here.
Because you're challenging their inner life or their lack thereof.
No.
By being different and thinking different and feeling differently. And because they don't measure those things that matter. Like they don't measure science or medicine because they can't directly profit from it. So that's why they diminish it and they downgrade. That's why the President Biden really has stepped up and put a lot of money into the endowment of the arts. Knowing the Republicans, they'll probably try to block it.
More than likely, of course, that's what they do.
They're stupid and they don't care about art and they don't care about creative output. I'm not going to go.
They don't care about people living. I mean, come on.
But so the book was really this is who my father was to me. He was an advocate first, a father first. And I think it has humanized people. It humanized him. It made him more accessible as a person by me sharing that part of him in a way that makes people stop and say, oh, he's a man, he was a father before beyond what he was on stage. And I thought that was more important than the name-dropping stories. Yes, there are stories in the book about having breakfast with Burt Lancaster and all these things. But if you look at all the stories, it's all about the fact that he was very humble when he met people. He could not believe that people valued him what he did because he never valued what he did. He always put it down saying, it's just acting, just comedy, just pie in the face. It's just silliness. And I don't think he really put a value on it that when we came out of, Vietnam, Watergate, Carson and Burnett, they were a healing salve for this country. So, but for some reason, my father never really put any direct intrinsic value on the idea that making people laugh could heal until he started touring with Tim. And you hear all these people say, you helped me get through cancer. You helped me get through my troubles. My father could not put those two ideas together. He thought a scientist is important. A doctor is important. A fireman is important. A lawyer is needed when you're being sued. Other than that, that was his thing.
I think it's a generational thing because your father and my father were contemporaries, and my father had the same kind of thing. It was what was of value, what wasn't. And it's interesting because I've spoken with either the children of, or when I was younger, lucky enough to speak to some of the people who were still living, celebrities who did not understand why people responded to them the way they did, what their impact on somebody's life could be. And certainly it comes through in your book that your dad was incredibly humble. He did not really comprehend, even among other celebrities, that he was a celebrity. So that was, I took that.
Thank you for saying that, because it was an endearing quality that he had, but it wasn't forced. He was genuinely, I mean, to have Cary Grant say, I'm a fan of yours. I mean, to have Fred Astaire and Burt Lancaster say, I know who you are. I've been watching you. I think that people don't understand this. You would understand this younger than most, is that people are coming to your TV set every Saturday night for 10 years between their feet. There's an intimacy with TV that you don't have with movies, because TV stars are more accessible than I think movie stars. You put them on a pedestal.
Absolutely.
I think TV stars are more relatable in that way, because, and I'm want not to do this because I never want to diminish on my Dr. My Ear page, and you see me on there, is I have put down the idea of breaking up. I'd never liked breaking up. I thought it was unprofessional to break the fourth wall. If the breaking up had any value as far as my father's image, is that it did make him more accessible to the general public.
I think that's absolutely true.
He didn't attach himself to the idea that I'm this performer, I'm this thespian, you can't possibly relate to me. But his image, as far as the work goes, is if people saw him breaking up, they thought, oh, he's a very undisciplined performer, he's going to break up a lot. I noticed he did that more with Tim than with anybody else. He didn't do that with other people. I'm not going to go on a rant about that, but he did care about his image as a performer, because your next job is your next job, and your next job, your next job. So you have to get a level of awareness about how people perceive you, because he did some of his best work with Carol. I think he did a lot of his best work. I think he did a lot of his best work with Carol, certainly in those 10 years, and he certainly did a lot of great work with Mel in 4 movies. And I mean, I come across people as you have, and yeah, it's that break the fourth wall is that it's live and it's immediate and it's relatable and it's now. And my father came from Goodman Theater in Chicago. He studied with Uta Hagen. I used to joke with my dad. I'd say, Dad, you have so much classical training. You have an existential crisis just saying good morning.
It's a great line.
So you do 20 minutes at the Icebox. And he said, yeah, I had done 20 minutes at the Icebox a couple of times, and I realized I was doing shtick. So he was trained to do in summer stock in Chicago, one show after another. So you learn what the jokes are, you learn rhythm, you learn pace, you learn dialects. So I'm not diminishing what the people did on the Burnett Show, Bob Mackey and Peter Matz and the dancers. But I think, I honestly say this, and it sounds biased, but I think if Carol doesn't have my father, there is no Burnett Show.
I think it's true. I mean, I love the show. I love Carol Burnett. Watching that show every week was a comic lesson. I mean, it was a lesson in how to do comedy. But you're right. Without your dad, they call, and in your book, you referred to him as a second banana. And I understand the term, but your dad was so much more than that,
Bristol, he hated the term second banana. He did not like the idea of being called a sketch comedian. He said, and you'll understand this better than anyone, he said, I'm an actor doing comedy. I'm not a comedian. I'm not playing the joke. I'm playing the reality.
Yep.
As far as you're doing satire, you can't indicate with your face, hi, by the way, I'm going to do a stupid joke here. You have to sift through what I'm saying to figure out the truth. No, you play the reality, because then it heightens the absurdity of what you're doing. You can't indicate with your face, hey, I'm doing stupid shit here. Pardon my French, but so he tried to explain to people, it's like, if you refer to me, you refer to me as an actor or an artist, because he can do it all, and he could do it all. And I think sketch comedy became, I've had many people ask me this. If there's one regret my father didn't had is that he was not allowed to do. The industry did not see him as a lead man, because he could do lead man roles, but that wasn't his thing. But he was a character actor, and he could do characters. And I think John Ritter fell into that, and Larry Hagman fell into that. You become a victim of your own success, and people see you as John Ritter, oh, you're Jack Tripper, Harvey Korman, oh, you're Hedley Lamar. The casting people in the industry can't think outside the box. Is it possible?
No, I've talked about that with a lot of people, because in America, they like to pigeonhole an actor into this niche.
Right.
So, somebody like your dad, comedy actor, real funny. And I think if he had tried to do something serious and dramatic, he would have ended up getting the same reception Bill Murray got when he came out with, I can't remember the name of the movie, that serious movie he did years ago.
Glory with Robert De Niro?
No. It was, he was like some guy looking for a spiritual awareness up in
right.
Journeying in the Mountains. And It was a really good movie, and he was wonderful in it, but nobody would accept him because he was Bill Murray. And Bill Murray's not allowed to do a straight thing. And certainly Harvey Korman wouldn't have been, because he was in a generation where you really couldn't break out of that. So, it's, the difference, the comparison I was trying to make was, in Britain, when you're an actor, you're trained, you're supposed to be able to do anything.
That's right.
And you're expected to, and you're allowed to, and that makes so much more sense to me. In this country, though, they want you, this is who you are, what you do.
Yeah, Ron Williams does Good Morning, Good Will Hunting. He wins an Oscar, and people are, it's like, what range he has. He went to Juilliard. Oh, he did? Oh, okay. That really would explain it. Oh, okay. So if he had not gone to Juilliard, that means that dismisses the fact that he could do dramatic work. Most of our greatest clowns can do both.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand that. I mean, who's the great actor? I mean, Glenn.
Yes, go please. That's my favorite quote. Give it.
Usually my favorite year too.
Yep.
He says, "Dying is easy, comedy is hard."
Exactly.
Boy, is that true? And I have to tell you, there's Joanna Woodward in an episode of the Burnett Show where she plays Eunice's friend, and Paul Newman is in the booth with Joe Hamilton, and Paul is sweating profusely, saying, "How do you guys do this every week? I can't believe you do 2 live shows every Friday night." And they're looking at it like, "You're Paul Newman, you can do it all." That's a fallacy. We assume every performer could do it all. I say, my dad could do dramatic roles, but do you think De Niro and Pacino could do sketch comedy?
probably, well, I've seen De Niro try it on
Right.
Saturday Night Live, and he wasn't really great at it.
It's a different discipline because you're taking the movie and condense it down to 7 minutes, and you have to give character, you have to have plot, you have to have resolution, you have to have conflict. And you have to do all those things in 8 minutes. You have to give character, you have to do all these things. Whereas a movie gives you whole time. It gives you the whole movie to do that and says the character. In 7 minutes, you got to establish who you are, your behavior, all those things. A lot of people can't do that. And Paul just couldn't believe that Carol and my dad and all these people are doing this every week. And he's sweating profusely. And Joe looks at him and says, but Paul knew you can do it all. And he said, no, that's not true. We assume everybody can do it all in this business. But if you're not trained to do it, because sketch comedy is not the same discipline as doing a movie. Because the sketch, you're going the whole way through. A movie is a fragment of pieces of moments tied together through an editor. So, when when I was writing the book, I thought I can measure the stories with my dad and who he was as a person and back and forth. And I tried to put in as much about what I learned from him. Was he didn't push me into the theater world because he wanted me to become famous. He did because he thought the world of theater is very inclusive, that it would be good for me to learn about the art of compromise, about how to get along with other people in that same world. You learn a script on Monday, you have cuts, you have new blocking. So to challenge my disability is you have to have short-term, long-term, because you have new blocking on Wednesday, and then Friday you have more blocking. So you have a new script, now you have 250 pages to memorize. Well, how are you going to memorize it? So he said, take those tools that you learned in theater and apply it to your learning disability and your challenges. But it'll be easier because you love theater. If you don't love what you're doing, then it's drudgery. But if you love what you're doing, the learning becomes easier because you love that world. And the other thing that he said you had to do is you have to up your game, because there's other people who have a degree in art. You can neutralize them as much as you can by saying, oh, I'm Harvey Korman's son. All of a sudden you get validation. But you have to play their game. You have to up your ante to them and match their level of commitment. Because they're not going to care that you'll win disability or not. They're going to care that you can deliver. I thought, wow. So right away he said, I'm not letting the LD be a crutch with you. I'm not going to let the LD define you. And right there, that told me, it's like, oh my God, it's like he's celebrating my disability as a blessing, not a blight on the family name. I said, no, Dad, your cross-dressing took care of that. Thank you. I said, would you stop talking to your mother, please? So that was the genesis, and my wife was right. I think taking a celebratory viewpoint of who my father was a better way than going what everybody else does, which is a tell-all book. I mean, Larry Hagman's daughter threw Larry Hagman under the bus with her book. A lot of people have done that to their parents. That wasn't the point of my book.
Well, I mean, to me, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I thought it was like a love letter to your father for everything he gave you in terms of love, support, just being there for you, that you knew growing up that you were number one for him, that over the show, over whatever he was doing, you mattered more. And that comes through, at least certainly to me, crystal clear. You know, you humanized your father. And
thank you, Yoni, for saying that, because that was the intent of the book. That is my way of saying thank you. He dedicated his one Golden Globe to me. He says to love Dad, to the world's greatest son, love Dad. CBS, 1974. I have that on my mantelpiece. I have it right there next to my desk. It sits right there. Greatest son, love Dad. And he brought it home. I'm like, why are you giving me your Golden Globe? I didn't win this. I was like, no, I gave this to you. He said, why? I said, because I wanted you to know that you are the world's greatest son. And I just lost it. That was just like, forget it. So I look at the Golden Globe every day, and it's a reminder that he really did celebrate as my mother did. He never made me feel like the speech impediment or learning disability was this thing that was going to hinder my ability to become what I wanted to become. It was, you're going to have to work at it. But there's an interesting, I think you understand this. There's almost a ambivalence I had, because it seems to me like I was defined by my learning disability in the sense of what worlds I were. I had my foot in the learning disability fundraising world, and I had my foot in the show business. And they both intersected a lot because of the speech impediment and learning disability and fundraising my dad did. So it seems to me a lot of times, Yoni, the fame part of who my father was diminished the disability. It's like, oh, you have money, you have fame. What could you possibly complain about? I said, did you notice I sound like Roger Rabbit? It somehow diminished or dismissed disability. Like, if you have fame and fortune, what could you possibly complain about? I'm like, well, one doesn't have to do with the other, because all the money in the world didn't keep me from having a learning disability. All the fame my father ever achieved didn't preclude me from having problems. So I don't understand that correlation. One doesn't have to do with the other. And so it bothered me when my wife said, you know, a good way to not have people use you, Chris, is don't open yourself up to, hi, I'm Harvey Korman. Get yourself in the door of things that you might be involved with. Prove your value and your worth. And that means your father won't be the reason they like you. The reason they like you is because they like you. But they're going to assume that if you go into it going, hi, I'm Harvey Korman, they're going to think two things. Either you have money, or you're just giving it away. And that I've already set myself up for failure, because that's what they're seeing, that's what they're hearing. Oh, you're 100%. So I'm learning the hard way. Sometimes just get your foot in the door and just prove my value to who Chris Korman is. And then my dad becomes a secondary issue. But I always felt like I had to introduce myself as him and give validation. And it's the reverse of that. It didn't help, it hindered it. And my wife was right. She said, prove yourself. Get yourself in the door first.
See, that's why you have Trish around, because she can help you with that and keep you on, like my wife does the same for me. But she was right. And I think you succeeded, because for anybody who hasn't read the book, and you should read the book if you haven't, it's not just about your dad. It's about you. It's the two of you. And there's the love letter part to him, but it's also your journey, what you were going through, and your father's impact on it. And I think that that came shining through. You couldn't miss it. And it really, really was a wonderful, wonderful thing, because your love for your dad and your dad's love for you just are on every page of that book, you know. And
I'm glad that you feel that way, because that's the biggest thing I've gotten from most of the women or friends I've talked to. I gave my book to my grandfather. I gave my book to my husband, and the stories about baseball. I good portion of my life, my bond with my father is not about show business. It's about baseball. It's about Dodger baseball. It's Vin Scully. It's sitting there at the Dodger game, and he explained to me the intricacies of a double switch, and eating peanuts and popcorn, and he explained the nuances of baseball. But just going miniature golfing with him, he didn't have to buy me a car or send me on a trip. Just being with him was the value of being with him. And you know, I said it on my webpage the other day. It's like he had it's that 6.5 second rule for holding a laugh. And I said to him, I said, you know, I timed one of your laughs on that Eunice special where you say, Eunice, I want you to come over to my house. I've got a new photograph needle. Who in their right mind would make a photograph needle sound sexy in 1955? He said, because that's understanding subtext. you have to find and understand what you're saying in the context of what Ed was at that time. He was a guy who worked with toilets and plungers, and he thought a photograph needle was sexy. It shows you how stupid Ed was. That's what makes it funny. The irony of how stupid somebody can think that making a photograph needle sexy in 1955 sounds logical. So I gave emphasis to the photograph needle, and he got a 6.5 minute laugh. I said, wait a minute, how did you know it was 6.5 minutes? It's like, I timed it. It's like, you don't have anything better to do. Do you have homework to do? Do you have anything else better to do with your time than timing my jokes? I said, I'm not timing your joke. I'm timing your delivery because you knew how long to hold for a laugh. And many, many years later, Yoni, amazingly, he said, I used to get mad at Tim. I used to get mad at Louise Duarte. I got mad at performers who would try to talk over their own laugh. And I just don't get it. Because comedy, like, you're a musician too, comedy is rhythm. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boom, bada bing. And if you're talking over your laugh, the audience isn't going to hear the next setup. They're going to hear fragments of it, and then they're not going to get the payoff on the next joke. So my dad would used to just bristle when Tim or Louise would start talking over their laugh. And he's like, I can't believe I have to explain to seasoned performers. You're making the written word come alive. You are the voice of the writer. You're the extension of the writer. The difference between a great writer and a bad writer is that the actor is able to take the material and elevate it. And I used to jokingly say a difference between a good writer eats at Denny's, a great writer eats at Spaga's, because the actor took the written word and elevated it and imbued it with subtext and elevated the writing with their craft. And I don't think people understand that. It's just, you just don't say the word and not understand why you're saying it. And so he always said, I know you understand what I do. But I don't think anyone's ever said to me that they timed my laughs before. I said, I don't do it because I'm just bored to that. I do it because I love you. Because even if you weren't my father, you would still be my favorite performer. How many people can say their favorite performer and their father are the same people?
Not many.
And he never got that. Even with me, he never valued that. To him, it was more important for him to be seen as a great father, a husband, than a performer. But the same day, he'll call me at 12 midnight. I'm in Maryland, living in Towson, Maryland. And he just had a performance on TV. And he'll call me up and say, what did you think? I said, about what? It's my performance. I said, do you think I'm going to tell you the truth? You're the breadwinner in our family. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. And I said, no, tell me, if there's anyone I would want to hear it from, it's from you. I said, Dad, when have you ever left a performance in the dressing room? He said, wow. No one's ever said that to him before. I said, you've never left a performance in the dressing room. You would know how to. You're not programmed to underperform. I said, oh, okay. It was nice talking to you. Love you, son. Bye. And then 20 minutes later, he'll call back and say, oh, by the way, how's Tristan Scott? I'm like, oh, and you called back. Okay, all right. And the Dodgers won last night. I'm like, yeah, okay, I know that. Okay, so, but yeah, I never. I mean, I've said this many times to him. I said, I never think he's ever. I don't think he's ever in his career not gave it his all. I can't say that about the same people around him. That I can say he never called it in.
Well, it's funny how people cannot see their impact or how what they do means anything or matters. And it doesn't just have to be about an actor. I mean, my dad was the same way. Again, I think part of it is that cultural thing, that Jewish growing up in the Depression kind of mentality. So you never really are sure that what you're doing has meaning or that anybody gets it or
Right.
that it impacts anybody.
And it's sad to go your whole life and have someone finally say, yeah, you did have value to me to have. I mean, when he met Laurence Olivier after the Burnett Show, it was surreal to him that Laurence Olivier knew who my father was. That was mind blowing to him and Carol, because my dad and Carol came from the same world where her idol was Jimmy Stewart and all these people, and for them to meet their idols and for their idols to know who they are, it was mind blowing to Carol, my father, because you know the pecking order: movies, TV, theater, movies, TV, in the pecking order of legitimacy. Of that.
Yeah, I know.
And then there's everything else. And the reason why my father never did theater as a career, I mean, he had a chance to tour in La Cage aux Folles, and he was about to have his third child. He said, I can't do one character for a year. I have to do broad comedy. I have to do satire. I have to do, and as much as he hated it, he said sketch comedy or broad humor works for me because I can lose myself in the character. I can play Mother Marcus. I can play Heather Lamar because that's not me. That's me purging whatever creative juice I have inside me. I have to purge that out of me. So it became almost like a cathartic purge for him to play Mother Marcus because basically, in essence, that was his mother or that was his grandparents. He was capturing the essence of who they were. He could play the costume wardrobe guy in Curse of the Pink Panther and the Panther movies with Peter Sellers. He could lose himself in these roles. But if you see him play Roger on Carol and Sis or play Ed on Mama's Family, he said, I can't play regular because I don't think I'm a regular person. I'm this actor. I'm this farceur. I don't know if people know. You know what a farceur is.
Of course.
But most people don't. That was his thing, was the broader I am, give me a wig, give me a dialect, I can play that. But if you ask me to play a schmo like Roger and Ed, I don't know what to do because I don't know how to play milk toast. I don't do milk toast. I don't play simplistic. That's boring to him. I thought, wow. Because a lot of performers wouldn't have the guts to go out there and put women's clothing on and be silly and crazy like that. But to him, it was an outlet, I guess. But he said he got around. He worked for Sellers a couple of times, and he said Sellers was very moody. I don't think Sellers knew who my dad was, or he knew who the other actors in the scene were with him. But Sellers kids are breaking up after everything my dad did, and Blake would say to Peter, "It's like you can't break up, Peter. It's like, but they're doing some funny stuff. Yeah, but you can't break up, Peter." And Blake loved my father. And when he went back to London, he and Julie Andrews showed my dad around London, and he was the most gracious of hosts. And I told Jennifer Edwards, Julie's daughter, that one of the seminal moments of his life was him, like Julie and him, showing him around London and treating him and showing him around and making him feel like a part of the family. And he always remembers that story. And I shared that with Jennifer Edwards. I said, please tell your mother how much that meant to him. And she came back and said, Julie, he said, because you have no idea how much love Julie has for your father. I said, well, I have only the utmost respect for your mother for what she did for my father. And that's the mutual admiration society that I feel like I have with a lot of the stars' kids. There's a genuine respect for what we've been through because we've all been through there. Because a lot of times the casualties in those relationships that we have with our parents who are famous, it's the kids that get burned, the marriages, divorces, because the parents are so fixated on the fame part. That's why I think people are scared when they found out my dad was more of a father. The performer became second. He took his craft seriously, but he didn't take himself seriously. There's a difference.
Yeah, that's very, very there. I don't know a lot of people who reach the pinnacle of popularity. How's that popularity that
Right.
your dad did, that A, could remain as humble, but also more important than any of that was his family, you know. And because my father was the exact same way, which I think is why we've become friends. we understand that. And I have to ask you this question because I asked Jody when she was on last. So I have to ask you too, since what was it like for you to grow up as much of the time as you did backstage at the Burnett Show?
I'm sure Jody will tell you, Friday nights are very electric. To sit in the audience, and you have the audience signs flashing, and you could hear matches playing Take the A Train or Rampart Street Parade in the band show. And you sit at Lifesavers, and Jody and I and the family members sat in the first two rows or middle first two rows. So it was Jody and I, some of Tim's kids. Jody will tell you, there's a level of energy, I mean, that you can't, it's unfathomable. It's ephemeral. It's like a drug, because it was every Friday night I went the last 5 years, but I wasn't old enough to go the first 5 years because I wasn't old enough. But Jody will tell you, just to be in the studio with the other people, but when they would do something on stage, I could look at Jody and go, "Oh God, that is so Harvey. That is so your mom." There's an inside joke feeling to it that you don't have with anybody else. Because Jody and I could look at each other and go. But I love going to the tapings. We would get dressed up. We would go to IHOP for dinner before we drive down to Fairfax. We go out to the studio, visit my dad a little bit before. Sister and I, Marie and I, would go visit my dad before or after. And it was surreal, because I would be watching my father and thinking, that's my father. That's not the same father that's at home. That's a father that's removed from me. But he told me many years later, when he toured with Tim, he said, I never wanted you and Maria or anybody that I knew to be an eye shot at me, because if I saw you, I was afraid I was going to go up on my lines, because if I felt like I let you guys down, I would be able to perform anymore. I thought, wow, he never told me that. I said, I didn't want to tell you not to come to the tapings because I wouldn't hurt your feelings, but I always made sure that the ushers put you where you could not be an eye shot at me. I had you were down below. If I saw you, I couldn't perform anymore, because the burden or the fear of, if I let you down and not perform at my best, that would kill me as a performer. And I thought, wow. The level of anxiety that he had about performing, the level of the anxiousness he felt about if he felt like he wasn't good enough. And that's why when I told him, when he would call me up and ask me about my critique on performances, I said, when have you ever not given your all? I said, because Chris, it's the idea of failure perpetrates this idea of I'm more successful because I was afraid to fail. That's part of it. The more fear of failure I got, the better I got, because I never want to feel like I left anything on the stage. I never want to have the regret, did I not give it my all? So it's almost a strange way to say this, but his insecurity or his humility precludes him from having an ego. He was always striving for more, to do better. So he never got complacent and said, oh, I've done enough. I don't have to do anymore. I want to keep on doing better. And I said, Dad, you always told me that my need to live up to your expectation was in your head. Well, I have to say to you, this idea that you're never good enough is in your head, because you've always been good enough. But the complacency is that, oh, I've done it all. I won an Oscar, I won a Tony. I've done it all. I don't need to do anymore. There's always that one role that an actor seeks out. That I want to do that role because it scares me. And I want to challenge myself. And I learned a lot about that. It's just that when I watch him perform live, it was like, wow, that's a different father at home. But you understand this better than anybody because you love comedy like I do. is he would try one camera comedy, like Love Boat or a one camera sitcom. You can't do comedy with one camera, with cam laughter, because you have to assume, you have to have like a metronome in your head. How long do I hold for a laugh? How long do I assume the audience at home is going to get this joke? And if you wait too long, it breaks the rhythm of the joke. That's why he didn't like doing one camera sitcoms like Nut House or Love Boat. Because you're always having to assume the audience is not going to get it at home. Because comedy is an immediacy.
Well, yeah. I mean, on the Burnett Show, he had an audience.
Right.
So there was something to time the laughs off of. And, performing, going and touring with Tim Conway for all those years in front of live audiences. Yet, let's also remember that his timing and his talent shining through, like as Hedley Lamar in High Anxiety, he's still kicked ass,
He did that. A lot of that comes from Mel, because Mel was smart. He brought Mal and Connie. He brought in Howard Morris. He brought in people he trusted and loved, because Mel was smart enough to realize that he's not the greatest actor in the world, but he's better when he surrounds himself with better people. Or as Carol used to say, you're a better tennis player if you play with better players.
Right.
So Mel used to call Harvey and Mal, and say, they're my self-starters. They bring something very strong to the screen that no one else can bring, that I play off of that. Because I'll tell you, the first scene in Blazing Saddles is the paddle scene. And my dad was so nervous at that, because he worshiped Carl and Mel as a 2,000-year-old man. My dad studied everything Mel ever did. So he had a level of love and respect for Mel, even before he got to the set. And the paddle scene was the first day. And he didn't know if he wanted to do too much improvising. And I said, and Mel and my dad had never worked together. Now, Carl and Mel had a great trust and respect for each other, because they've worked together already. You have to find, you're a musician, you understand this. You have to find your rhythm of the other performer. You can't cut off a joke if the actor has not finished his line. Dad didn't know how to figure that out in the master shot, in the white shot. And then you start playing, tinkering with things. And I said, Dad, for people who have never worked together, it's amazing how much chemistry you and Mel had. Because there was a level of trust and respect to let the other one shine. And it takes a secure person, because Red Skelton and Danny Kaye were not selfless people. They bristled if anyone else got a bigger laugh. Because my dad was fired from Red Skelton for getting the bigger laugh.
Wow.
And so when you work with Carol and Mel, you work with Val and Con, you work with Horace, you work with Ron Carey, and all these people who you've been around your whole life, and you're playing with material. There is a level of trust you have, but there's a level of affection that you have, but there's no ego involved. Everybody came to that set, I am Val and Con, I'm Harvey Korman, blah, blah, blah. Let's come and play. Let's come and serve the material. Whatever egos there were, they put aside. And Carol was the same way. She always made sure the guest star would shine. If the guest star is happy, I'm going to be happy. If the guest star is not happy, I'm not going to do well. And a lot of stars don't understand that. Johnny was that way. If Doc is hot, or Tommy Newsom is hot, or Ed is hot, it makes me better.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny understood that. Carol understood that. Mary Tyler Moore understood that on her show. You had Ed Asner, you had Ted Knight, you had Betty White, you had all these people. It elevates Mary's role, material.
Absolutely.
A lot of performers are not like that.
Yeah, I've worked with a few who weren't real fun if you were better, getting more laughs, even when they were supposed to be the straight person in it. I've been thinking about this, and you talking about it brought it up in my head again. I realized, Mel and Carl Reiner came out of your show of shows. Your father doing Burnett, that's basically the 1960s version and 70s of your show of shows. That was the closest thing to it. So even though they hadn't worked together before Blazing Saddles, they were coming from similar places and a similar
comedic sensibility.
Yeah, the sensibility was the same. And your father, had he been doing it, in the early 50s in New York, he would have been on your show of shows because it was the perfect venue for him. It wasn't there. He did Carol Burnett's show and did exactly what he would have done had he been on your show of shows.
Probably he would have fit in. Now Carl said this to me. My dad always put Carl and Art Carney, my father, considered like the three best sketch comedians or psych bananas, or whatever you want to call it. And Carl said, "Your dad had a greater range than I did." I said, "But you were master dialecticians. So was your father. If you worked for Danny Kaye, you had to be a master dialectician because Danny Kaye was a master dialectician." But Carl said, "Your dad's range was greater than mine as far as dialects, and because your father was an actor. I wasn't trained to be an actor. I trained to be. I was a writer, and I trained to be a sketch straight man. But no, but your father could do more than I could." And I said, "Well, that's possible, Paul. I'm not going to argue with you, but you and Mel did can't be touched." So it was nice that there was a mutual admiration society with Carl, my father, and I got directed a special with Carl Reiner and Carol Burnett and Whoopi Goldberg and Rob Williams in '87. And my dad could not believe he was directing these big stars. And he said, it was working with Robin Williams was surreal because you don't want to stifle that creativity. You don't let him go. But Robin had such referential love for my father. It was hard. Let's do what you want to do, and then let's play with it. And my dad was scared shitless the whole week to work with Robin. And I took my best friend Scott Marshall from high school with me, and I'm sitting behind Robin's agent. And Robin turned around and said, "Did you just say your father was afraid of Robin?" It's not afraid, but he knew Robin's image as an improv guy, and that he had such a quick mind. His agent turned around and said, "You have it a little bit backwards." I said, "What?" "Robin was scared to work with your father because of how much referential love he had for your father. Your father's an icon." And I'm like, "Well, a minute. Robin is an icon. So now your father, people aspire to love what your father did." And I was thinking, man, generationally, Robin Williams and John Ritter was my guys. That was my generation. Robin Williams and John Ritter. You have to put a historical understanding of that is I'm 18. If I'd grown up with my father, I might have only liked him, but that wasn't my generation. So right. Robin Williams even say that Robin worshiped my father. I'm like, what? Really? That gave me a different perspective at where my father sits in the annals of show business and comedy. He's considered one of the best. And when he was in the Hall of Fame in 2002 with Carol and Peter Marshall, Bob Mackey and John Frankenheimer and Gene Stapleton. It was surreal to him that he was going to this Hall of Fame with his idols, Jack Benny and all these people. And I said to him, "See, Dad, I always knew you would get into an institution. I just thought it was be Bellevue."
I'll tell you what, let's wrap it right there because you're not going to get a better line than that.
I don't know. I was saving that one, but
and it worked. It's
he loved that line. But as much as people love Blazing Saddles, I have to say the werewolf scene in High Anxiety, where he's got the teeth in and the eyes, and it's probably my favorite scene my father has ever done, and I don't know why. There's something that hits me that it's great editing, it's great comedy. It's Ron Clark who plays the patient. It's Mel. It's that trust. It's the cohesive way they work together. But for some reason, High Anxiety, I don't necessarily like maybe Blazing Saddles is 1A, High Anxiety is 1B. Then I had History of the World Part 1, and so it's hard for me to pick, but I still talk to Mel today. I'll periodically call Mel and say, yeah, hey, what's going on? How are you? And he'll say, well, how's Trish and how's Scott? And anytime I call him, his assistant puts me through. Like he's 96, let the man rest. I don't want to bother him. I don't want to feel like I'm exploiting whatever relationship my dad had with Mel for selfish gain. And Mel said to me once, like, Chris, I love you. I tolerated your father. And I said, well, all joking aside, Chris, you can call me anytime. If you ever need anything, just call me. Let me know. If you need anything, just call me. I'm like, that is so surreal to me that people like Mel Brooks say that to me, because I never want to feel like I'm a burden to him, or that I would exploit the relationship that he and my father had. It's like, I love you on the merits of who you are besides your father. And that's like, and when I go on Facebook and John Biner reaches out to me, so I just read your book about your dad and you. I had no idea you had a learning disability, Chris. I've known you for how long? I said, well, John, I can go around telling people, hi, I'm Chris Korman. I have a learning disability. Hi, I'm Chris Korman. I'm an alcoholic. You know, it's not like that. I said, I had such a great newfound appreciation for your father, Chris, after reading your book. I have such great fondness for you. I'm like, this is John Biner telling me this on Facebook. And I've idolized John Biner my whole life. He's one of my comedy idols. And for him to say that to me was just like, it doesn't get much better than that when people that you idolize. Now I understand how my dad felt.
Yeah.
And something you love. Give you a sense of, acknowledge you on the merits of who you are, not necessarily who you're related to. So for John Biner to say that to me, or Rich Little to say that to me, it's like, I like you, Chris, for who you are beyond who your father was. It's like, I'm humbled by that, because they don't have to talk to me. I appreciate that if they think I have value and I'm a kind person, that's wonderful to hear. I don't want to think myself as a bad person, but I'm always flattered when people that I love find that they like me. I'm like, wow.
You know what? I'm going to wrap this up with this. Christopher, you are your father's son. You know, you are. It's that simple. The humble, there's no bullshit. It's just who you are. You grew up with a man who you loved and adored, and who loved and adored you. And it's all there. It doesn't have anything to do with fame. It doesn't have anything to do with, the public acknowledgement. It's simply who he was. It's who you are. And
I appreciate that.
And I want to wrap it there, because we're not going to do better than that.
Oh, we could try, but I don't think it would
Yeah. But besides which, you can always come back and we can do it again. So, Chris, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
And I'm going to demand that my entire audience go out and get your book and read it. Yeah, they won't, because nobody listens to me, but I'm going to do it.
Okay, well, then tell them. Or Bear Manor. I actually emailed, after we talked, I emailed Jody and I said, do you know Yoni? And before I could get Martin's out, he's like, oh my God, how do you know Yoni? He's like, well, Yoni and I met on Facebook, and because every time I look at somebody that knows somebody else, I want to know who they know, so I can make a connection. And I saw that you knew Jody Hamilton, so I went to Jody and said, "Do you know Yoni?" And before I get Martin's out, I see the three dots. Oh my God, you know Yoni? I said, "Yeah, we're really good friends." And he lives in Maryland, which is where my wife is from. So he's like, "Your wife is from Maryland?" I didn't even know that, Chris. I said, "Yeah, she's from Dundalk." So I said, Yoni and I just connected so quickly. And he loved having you on his show, and he adores you, and I adore you, Jody. And please give your love to your mom. And she always does. But it's the game with Jody. It's like, I don't talk to Jody just because she's Carol's mom. It's like, hey, how you doing, Jody? How are you and your husband doing? Lonnie, how are you guys doing? It's not always, Jody, I have a question to ask you about your mother. Then she starts thinking, the only reason I talked to her because I want to talk to her. I want to connect with her mother. I would never use Jody that way. And
Well,
I think
Jody, like you, you know, you you are your own person. Jody is her own person. And I love Jody because she's smart, she's funny, and you know, we share politics.
I share all the same political views.
You know, and it's funny because, you know, Jody's a regular on the Stephanie Miller Show every Tuesday. And Stephanie is a huge Carol Burnett. Carol Burnett was her idol because Stephanie started as a stand-up comic. So when she met Jody, on the one hand, she's trying to beat, you know, Jody for Jody, but you know, she had in her house this huge poster of Carol Burnett, and she was like, well, I don't want Jody to think I'm kind of weird stalker lady thing. But anyway, Jody brought her mom and Steph together, and that was like, I think Stephanie was crying because she was just so overwhelmed, you know. And you love somebody for who they are. If Jody wasn't who she is, I don't care who her mother is, you know. And if you weren't who you are, you and I wouldn't be friends because, you know, your dad's Harvey Korman. You and I are friends because we talk and we have so much in common, you know. And our, speaking of which, I asked my wife about how the dancing with the with no depth perception. Right. She said muscle memory. It's all muscle memory.
It's like baseball. It's like a player hitting a baseball. It's muscle memory.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't played in a while, but I bet you I could get up and my muscle memory would, I'd probably strike out against a good pitcher, but hey, what the hell?
But yeah, you know, I was going to ask you about that is if you've been dancing long enough, because a dancer's body, it's almost gets to the point where it's almost self-trained. So they know where to do a high kick or a time step. They just know instinctively. If you work with Fosse, you dance a certain way.
Yeah.
With Jerome Kern, he taught differently. Fosse had his own method. Alvin Ailey had his methods.
Absolutely.
Debbie Allen, Donna McKechnie.
Oh God, Donna! I love Donna McKechnie.
You know, most people don't know that she started on Dark Shadows.
She'd actually, before Dark Shadows, she'd done a few. She was a Broadway gypsy. She was a chorus dancer, but she stood out so much. I've known two dancers who on Broadway who stood out so much that they had to be showcased because there was just something about them. It was Donna, and Anne Reinking was the other.
Yes, well, she studied under Fosse. I mean,
yes, she was Fosse's girlfriend for a while. And Donna McKechnie had my voice teacher, Kurt Peterson, was her boyfriend for a while, and he produced her first one-woman show.
Really? Wow.
Which is when I met her. But yeah, oh God.
Well, here's the funny thing about meeting Donna. She's in Santa Monica, at the Brentwood Country Mart in Santa Monica. Now, my stepfather, most people don't know this because I don't talk about it a lot. My stepfather, George Chicenza, who played Vincent Bugliosi in Helter Skelter, was associate producer on Dark Shadows with Dan Curtis, because they were both Yale guys. And so I'm sitting there, and I came back to get something to eat, and Don McKechnie is talking to George, and they're hugging and kissing. Like, I don't know, is George and Don McKechnie? So I walked over, and she's still one of the sexiest women ever to me, period. And I was 18, and I said, "Oh my God, you Don McKechnie." She said, "You know who I am?" I said, "Even non-gay men know who you are."
Yeah.
I said, how do you know George? I said, I started on Dark Shadows pre-Chorus Line. This is 71, 72. She wasn't on Chorus. Dark Shadows very long. So that's how I know George, because I said, oh my God, you're freaking Don McKechnie. And George is like, can you start saying that? I said, well, how do you, well, that doesn't explain. Oh, that's right. George, you're associate producer of Dark Shadows like that now.
I think it's very bizarre that your life and mine have intertwined in some really bizarre ways. I mean, like that I knew George, I guess, after your mother and he divorced, when he was doing master classes at the School for Film and Television in New York, where I was. So
it is, but I couldn't, and you know this better than anyway. She's self-effacing. She's so humble.
Yeah.
She was, and I think the secure ones are usually the secure ones often don't have to say like how great I am, but she was just, and she gave me a hug, and I hugged her, and I kept on walking around and say, George, next time you're hugging a famous person, let me know before I walk up and say stupid shit. Like, oh my God, you're freaking Don McKechnie. It's like, well, I wasn't expecting you to come over. I thought you left. I thought, oh, okay. Well, I came back. I had a drink in my hand, and I said, oh my God. And it's like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, and Don McKechnie. And George said, well, Don, you know Chris's dad is Harvey Korman. And she got all excited. And I just said, just to meet you is just great. It's just one of my great honors. To meet an icon like yourself is just, and she was so sweet. And so, it was just amazing. So I know you have great affection for Donna. So
yeah.
She has that theater, 5678 Foundation in New York, and I had a couple of friends who went to study there. But I think there's a step you had to take to get in. And I emailed her after George had died in 2010. I said, like, Mr. McKechnie, first of all, I'm not exploiting the fact that you knew George. Wait a minute, you're Chris. I said, you remember me? I said, you're Chris. You're Harvey's son, George's stepson. I'm like, okay, now I'm really just off to the races now. Like, she remembers. I had great talk with you at the Rutland Country Meet that day. I said, do you remember? I said, you were so sweet and so kind to me. And I'm like, I love George. I'm sorry about his death. I'm like, thank you. I want to ask, what is the process of enrolling in your 568 Foundation? And I said, well, I have 2 or 3 young girl friends that want to study at the foundation. What is the process? But I did not ask them to play favoritism, Donna. And I just asked you what the process is so they can enroll. Just tell them to put your name on top of the paper, that's who the connection came by. And I said, well, Donna, you don't have to really give them consideration because of me. It's like, I'm happy to do that for you, Chris. But I was very respectful of the fact that I didn't want to play nepotism on that. And I told her that. And she said, I have more respect for you for doing that and saying that. But I will watch out for them. And I appreciate that. Mrs. McKechnie, she said, please call me Donna. I'm like, no. I could not call Jack Benny Jack. I can't call you. I said, yes, you can call me Donna. I'm like, okay, I'm just done for the day. I'm just like, Don McKechnie told me I could call her Donna. I'm done for the day. I'm finished. I'm okay. I'm complete now as a human being. Don McKechnie told me I could call her Donna. That kind of person she was, you know.
Yeah.
And you have a far greater appreciation for what she did. I mean, Priscilla Lopez, and there's a lot of great people in Chorus Line, but without Don McKechnie, there is no Chorus Line.
Well, especially since it's interesting because I don't know, Wayne Salento.
Yes, I know the name.
Wayne did I Can Do That, and he and I way back long were friends because we used to take the same train. It was really funny watching him as he became famous for Chorus Line, start getting more. Right. Wearing a big fur coat and all that kind of crap. But he and Donna, they did a American Dance Machine. They did a performance in LA where they brought all these Broadway stars back in to recreate their great big numbers. And American Dance Machine who their whole thing is recreating great Broadway dance numbers.
Oh,
They did a number on this one show from the Over Here, which was the Andrews Sisters early
right.
1970s show. And so it was a big 1940s number, and Donna and Wayne came in and danced the leads in it. And,
Wow.
and you know, one of the, excuse me, Wayne was telling me when they workshopped Chorus Line, basically they came in, they got a bunch of dancers to come in and tell their stories for a few days. Donna acted her story with Michael Bennett,
Right.
which was bizarre in and of itself, since
Yes.
everybody knew he was gay, and I don't know how the hell that worked. But
Yeah, I know.
but Wayne doing the "I Can Do That" number, he said that wasn't my story; it was somebody else's. But that's who they cast me to do, and I agree. Without Donna, that show doesn't exist.
Well, it's
Without
without Gwen Verdon,
oh God,
Chicago. I mean, most people think of, Richard Gere as Billy Flynn. It's like, no, Harry Orbach was the first Billy Flynn. Most people don't know that. It's just, I met Angela Lansbury at the Hall of Fame induction, and I had met her at Nordstrom's a couple of years before, I think 15 years before, and the room was darkened. So I don't know how well she could see me. I said, "Mrs. Lansbury, my name is Chris Korman. Oh, you're Harvey's son." I said, "Yeah, well, thank you." I said, "You worked with my stepfather, George DiCenza," and she got a big smile on her face because she used George like 10 times on Murder, She Wrote. She loved George. And she wrote a part in where he got to be the showcase person on that episode. And she stepped back and let George shine. I said, "You had the dubious honor of working," the first time I met her, I said, "You had the dubious honor of knowing my dad, Harvey Korman. You worked with him on Danny Kaye, and you worked with my stepfather, George DiCenza, on Murder, She Wrote." And she got a big smile on her face. "Oh my." So she gives me a hug and kiss right in the middle of Nordstrom's rack. And my boss is going like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, Chris, you can't be hitting on stars." It's like, I know the woman. My father's worked with her. And he's not supposed to bother the patrons. I'm like, oh, so you get an opportunity to meet an icon like Angela Lansbury, you take it. So she said, "Look, I don't want to bother you." And I did. I wasn't loud about it. It was just an honor to meet you. I said, "So please give a big hug and kiss to George for me and to your dad." And she gave me a hug and said, "That's for you too." Because I was trying, I did not say, "Hey, look who I'm talking to." I just said, "Mrs. Lansbury, you're an icon. And my dad and George both love working with you." And that's all I said. So when I saw her at the Hall of Fame induction 15, 20 years later, she's like, "You're Harvey's son, George DiCenza's stepson." I'm like, "Oh my God, you remember that?" I said, "We met at Nordstrom's rack in the shoe department." I said, "Yeah, well, I was trying to be nondescript about it, I said, "Well, you're very kind. You were thoughtful enough to respect my privacy." I said, "Well, I was trying to." I don't know how that worked, but I said, "Well, it's great to meet you again." And it's like, and I said, when you see George, please send him my love." I said, "I will." And it's things like that, Yanni, that just it's like when people my dad met. The fact they knew who my father was, but for them to extend their love, their kindness to me, and they don't have to. I'm nothing to them because they don't know me, but they see me and connect with me on a different level, and they take time to say, "I like you for who you are." That is just so humbling to me, and it makes me really appreciate that I would not have access to these people if it wasn't for my father. So the blessings of knowing you is because Jody, my dad, it's the connections that I've made that sustain me. It's not the fame, it's not the fortune, it's not any of those other shallow, unimportant things. It's the relationships I have built because of the book, because of who my father was. That's what will stay me in my life, and that's what matters to me. Because
well, do you remember you and I The reason you and I started talking was because you were commenting on stuff I was posting on Jody's Facebook page. I always comment on stuff.
When I was saying it,
and you were commenting back to me, and then I commented back to you, and somehow, boom.
I had to think for a second. It's like, this isn't my page. Why am I making comments on not my page? I'm on Jody's page once in a while. I'm not on there all the time, but she'll post something about her mother or something that I believe in, and I'll chime in. And Jody says, I love your take on things about especially Trump and stuff. But I never want to feel like I'm on there because I feel like I have to, because of our mom and dad knowing each other. I like Jody for Jody. So I could have seen your name, Yoni. I'm like, he's not responding to everything I say. He must like me. And then you started posting things that I like. I'm like, this is kismet. When you told me you were from Maryland, I'd say, this is just kismet to me. This was meant to be. So when Jody said, so she wrote me back and said, I love Yoni. I mean, oh my God, I can't believe you guys became good friends. Like, we've become very good friends. And she attended
my 65th birthday party last year on Zoom.
Really? So, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Heard that.
And she was my very first guest. And really? She was, I had her back for the first anniversary show. So, I mean, I love Jody. Jody, you speak to people, and for me, like, Jody's a celebrity because she does this show every week that I love, and I've watched her and thought, this is a really smart lady. I'd love to get to know her. And somehow, I don't even remember how we started communicating, but when I started thinking about the show, I said, okay, who would I like to be my first guest? And I said, Jody. And so I emailed Jody and I said, would you be willing to do it? She didn't fucking hesitate a second. She said, absolutely, I'm there. And I'm like, I feel the same way you do. It's like, other than our communications, she didn't know me from Adam. And here, sure, I'll spend an hour and a half with you on the show, and boom.
Like that. So anyways, I gotta go. But give my love to your wife, and I hope is it your mother-in-law that has Alzheimer's, or is it your mother?
It's my mother-in-law. Yeah.
I hope she's better.
Fortunately, I mean, she's not too far along. She's in the phase where she can't remember. She can remember 50 years ago, but she can't remember 5 minutes ago. Oh. And she's, this person who's like one of the sweetest people ever. And now she gets angry at things. And, it's all comes with the territory, I guess. But it's just, I hate it. And, you were born with that thing, the lack of oxygen. My dad had Parkinson's. Wow. And he went in for a treatment where they were supposed to oxygenate his brain. And somehow they did the exact opposite. They stopped the oxygen. My dad, who was one of the greatest communicators I've ever known, man spoke 5 languages. He was, who Ida Lupino was?
Yeah.
My dad's doing a movie in Europe, producing a movie in Europe she was married at the time to Martin Balsam, I think. And so she was there with him and watched my dad do this meeting in 5 languages with all these different people connected with the film. And it's like, that's who he was. And after they starved his brain of oxygen, he could never, for the rest of his life, communicate. You could see in his eyes, he wanted to say something, but he couldn't get the words to his mouth. And it was so painful for him. so painful to watch. When he died, it was because he wanted to. He was fed up, and he just couldn't take it anymore because his whole life was about communication, and it had been stolen from him. So
when you're used to the faculties you have and it's part of who you are and that's gone, it's like, why should I live? And so my dad kind of felt like anyways. I have the link you sent me, the material that you sent me to do the networking. Do you think it works better as a theater piece or as a movie?
I think it works better as a film.
Okay, I just want to know that because I know the theater world and I can access people in the movie thing. I just want to be able, if I pitch it, I want them to say, I want to be able to understand. I'm pitching it with the idea that it's a movie, not a play. They say, can it be adapted for a play? I'm like, well, I'd have to go back and ask the person. But I don't understand.
Actually, my wife is finishing a book on it too, because she says, people love to have things that were books that made from the book. So she wrote the book, and she's about 3/4 the way done so that she could have the book to be supposedly based on, just for the people who need that kind of crap.
Right, I know.
But we had a guy in New York who was he saw the video of the play, and he's a writer, director, producer, and he wanted to help us, and he supposedly had access to money and
tell me this
people. And I got an email from him. I sent him an email inviting him to a meeting we were having this week for Team ET. We call it Team ET, all the people who are really working to get this thing made. And so I invited him, and he said, he had asked us to create a 2.5 minute clip that he could show to prospective and his investors, which we did. And, it starts with my wife picking up her shirt and flashing on her first entrance coming in at the airport. And so we put it in the thing because it's funny. And these people obviously don't get comedy because all they could see was, oh my God, we don't want to, is it porn? We don't want to be,
Okay, my wife needs the computer.
Okay, go get Trisha and let her have her computer back.
All right.
And I will speak to you soon. But thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
All righty, man. Later.
Bye.
So there you have Chris Korman. Just a really, really wonderful guy. I had a rant that I was going to do, and God knows a rant is merited given Ron DeSatan in Florida, given Abbott in Texas, and the way they snuck the little abortion bill through with the help of the right-wing members of the Supreme Court. But I'm not going to do my rant because, as always seems to happen with my friends, I ran over. And as it is, the show's long enough. So I'm going to take next week's show and do an extended rant, which probably means a shorter show, but a good rant. So in any event, that's it. That's my show for today. If you like the show, please, subscribe to it. You can listen to it. Well, obviously, you can listen to it on your favorite podcast network or watch the video, which I assume you're doing one or the other right now. Please like us on our Facebook page, like us on Instagram, Twitter. We're all over social media now, and I've even got somebody helping me with social media. So all the usual things I say. And if you're a first-timer, well, you can guess, subscribe, like, all the wonderful usual things, or follow. Hey, you can follow too. Anyway, that's it. I got nothing else. Take care of yourselves. It's still really dangerous out there. Don't get taken in. Keep wearing a mask. Try to social distance. And whatever you do, don't take any shit from anyone. I'll see you next time.